Let's talk about schema markup. Schema markup is intimidating to a lot of people when they're first getting started, but hopefully in the next few minutes you'll get a better sense of what it is. It's not that scary. It's pretty simple on how to get it onto your site, and we'll let you know what parts are important, what parts are not so important. This is the latest video in our SEO tutorial series where we kind of take you through the whole process of what it takes to go from novice to getting a sense of the whole SEO picture. Previously, we've talked about how Google works, what it looks for, how to optimize your site, what to do off your site. And now we're going back to your website. So schema is something you do to your website. And it's just another way to help Google understand what your content and what your brand is about. My name is AJ Pactel, founder of several companies, including Outreach Mama and Linkio. So let's talk schema markup. Have you ever Google searched something and in the search results, you see not only the title, URL, and description, which is all normal, but you also see star ratings like this. This is an example of the effects of schema markup. You add some code to your site, Google's able to read that code, and it might choose to use that data in places like these search engine results. Okay, it's a type of metadata. We've talked about different metadata. We talked about your meta title, your meta description, your meta keywords, but this is another type of metadata it's data that tells Google what your web page or your content is about. There's different types of schema. And this all started a couple years ago when it just became really difficult for search engines to be able to distinguish between very similar sounding keywords. And I'll give you an example of that in a second, but here's some examples of where schema can be used. Let's say we're talking about a movie. Well, then in the movie, you can create a code that says what the movie title is, what the time of each movie is playing, the opening times, the address, the email, phone number. So whenever you like search for movie times, you see that Google pulls up these listings of like available shows like that day, and you ask yourself, how are they doing that? That's actually a highly advanced use of schema. Let's try something like this. We got some movies here. Let's say if I do Incredibles 2 near me, see we've got all these show times. These are today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. So this is different movie theaters using schema. And obviously that's pretty high-end, complicated integrations. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to keep it basic, right? Because the concept of schema is just that it helps to make it easier for Google to understand what your content is talking about. Let's say you had the keyword new book, all right? Without schema, Google's got to figure out, is it a book that's new? Is it a business that's named new book? Is it a publishing brand named new book? Is it a book entitled new? Is it a new edition of a book? So trying to figure out what that means is very difficult for Google. And schema helps because it's metadata that tells Google clearly that this is a book with the title new. All right. If schema hadn't been applied, then Google would have to use like the URL, the metadata, the anchor text, and the content to figure out relevance. And the problem would be is that you're not just competing with other books with the title new, you're competing with all of these other things because Google doesn't know where to group you. So think about it this way, right? Google's got this huge database of web information, but if we don't give it definitions, it's just a table without headers. If you add definitions, it becomes very clear for Google what to put in their database. Imagine taking all this data and just dumping it into a database and it's not organized, or imagine adding schema to your site and then helping Google know exactly where to store the SEO page. We gave you some examples of information. So, I mean, what are all the information points and what data does Google have in its system? What are the fields that you can fill in? It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds depending on the industry that you're in. And the reason why this even exists in the first place is because Google, along with the other big search engines, they got together and they said there's got to be a better way for bloggers and webmasters to tell us more about their business. So they put their heads together. They came up with this code. They launched schema.org. And then that's where all of this data about what fields are available are located. So again, you can actually have this on content. You can say, oh, okay, you could easily put this kind of information, or you could take one step further and put everything into schema like this. And I'm going to actually show you what that schema looks like. I know right now it's still pretty abstract, but I'm doing that on purpose. Okay. So if that's the background, when should you use it? Why should you use it? When it makes sense to be more organized and more specific, that's when it makes sense to use it. So examples of that would be if you have a local business and you have a page that serves a certain location, use schema to show Google what those services are, what your brand name is, what that number is, what locations you serve. And depending on the other content, it could be restaurants, TV shows, movies, products, software applications. There's tons and tons of different ways to apply this stuff, and it takes Googling and some tinkering to really dial it in. But here's an example of another outcome. So you have the star rating again, and the star rating is the result of this schema example. So I was doing a Google search and I just put in buy pens online, and you see that this website has a star rating. So you go to this website here, it's got this 4.8 Google customer reviews, and if we open up the source code, we see this context, schema.org, the type is a local business, and then the aggregate rating, the rating is 4.85. So this is what the code looks like. And then you paste this schema code into the HTML of your website. And that's where Google's crawler is reading this. Now, this isn't necessarily content for humans, right? This is going into the background of the site for the most part. Oftentimes it's not even visible to the user. It's really for the robots to understand what your site is about. That's why it's in this confusing code. And don't get too overwhelmed. I mean, a lot of people aren't necessarily technical. And what I've talked about with SEO so far is pretty straightforward because you're creating content, you're updating your title, you're modifying your URL. It's all simple front end stuff. And now we're getting into kind of like the back end, like the big hairy monster stuff. And if you're intimidated by it, that's totally fine. If you're using WordPress, there's actually plugins that you can install that actually help you do all this stuff without digging around in the back end. Just keep that in mind. So, keeping it very high level, there's different ways that you can apply schema, whether it's JSON or microdata, RDFA. You can paste it into the HTML. One simple way to do this is you can go to Google's structured data markup helper. So let's just Google that real quick. Let's give you an example of how this works. Let's say you had a website and you said, you know what? I want to create some schema. So you can go to a tool like this and actually test what your current schema is. See, Google knows what my URL is, it knows what my name is. It's got a little bit of info, but I could dial this up to 10 if I wanted to. So here's another tool that actually creates the code that you can add to your site and then do the testing thing. Here's the URL. It's called the Markup Helper. And let's say we're going with the Linkio example again. In my case, Linkio is a software application. So you click the button, start tagging. It's going to load the page. And then since you selected software application, Google's going to automatically load the fields that are most relevant for software. It's going to load the schema that's most relevant for software. And then you can go through the tool and highlight certain parts of your content, tag it, and then Google spits out a code. I'll show you real quick how that works. So here it's asking you what your name is. So I'm going to find the name somewhere on the page. There's my name. Okay, now this is categorized as name. It's asking me what the image is. This is the image. Okay, now if I wanted to go ahead and I was done and I wanted to create the HTML, this is the code that I would add to the head section of the HTML on my page. Whenever you add codes to a page, there's a head section, there's a footer section. Depending on what content management system you're using, WordPress, you can do this directly through the WordPress interface. You can install a plugin that says header code add-on or something like that, and you install that plugin and you just paste in this text, you hit save, and then you can refresh and then go ahead and test out what you did. That's as simple as working out. So that's a general introduction, very high level. I hope it's helpful. If you have any questions, aj@linkio.com is where you can find me. And if you want to check out some more of our resources, go to our website, go to our resources page. We've got some cool, helpful, free tools. We've got more content guides. You can subscribe to our newsletter. You can check out our SEO conferences that we run. You can look at our case studies. If you have any questions, if you need some help, if you want to see another video like this, but you're not, that I didn't address, and you want me to address it in a video tutorial, let me know and I'll work on it. Thank you.